All right, meow. And the bottom left in the red, going for just a 15 hatch, trying to take the gold. Oh yeah, there we go. He's gonna try to take the funky base. We're gonna zoom in on that one instead. For Gaming Gladiators, it's Shin. There we go.
Money, 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 money. You love to see it. In the top right, his opponent, he is not going for a Nexus first to the gold base. Not that we know of. He is Astrea. Now, if he does send his probe immediately to the opposite side of his own gold and builds a Nexus there, I'm just going to walk away. But that's not happening here. So thankfully, his probe will just go over. Likely confirm this very early. It's yeah, he clicked it to the gold mineral patch, so he's gonna approach it from the outside, and he will immediately know this. Bayo, what do you make of the positioning of the hatchery here for Shin? I think we all know you get more money from gold minerals, but to have access to that gold gas, is it because he just wants to use a low number of drones for a big 2-base attack, or is this some kind of bait? I feel like Astrea, if he's known for anything, kind of has to be a little bit of that greed. He is a player that loves to play big, overwhelming kinds of macro Protoss styles in all matchups. So I have to wonder how much of this is like Shin just going into this map with a build versus Shin trying to play versus Astrea. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Nate. So I'm going to answer your question, but first of all, when was the last time you saw an eye doctor? When was the last time you went to an optometrist?
About a year ago.
The reason I ask is
I got fitted for these guys.
I'm pretty sure this is a purple gas, not a gold gas.
Well, functionally speaking, you know what I mean. I appreciate the clarity for our heart of eyesight viewers, but I think you see what I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I got you. But I know. So I think this is one thing and one thing only coming out of Shin. We see the Roach Warren going down pretty quickly. This is for Roach Ravager pressure, and I gotta say, I know you talk about Astrea liking this big, boisterous macro games. I feel like this gold base for PvZ is nigh untakeable for the Protoss player for quite a while. Certainly taking it on this side, because you just post up with Ravagers just about right there. It can't really be contested super easily. Biles go down, the probes never get to mine. Ravager range is a strong thing.
In the base too.
Oh well,
he slips them by. So that Adept tries to go to punish the gold base a little bit, and he kind of just ends up giving some room for the Lynx to get through. Looks like he's not lost much in the way, just a single worker for each side so far taken down. What a awkward, it feels like an awkward start because it's now revolving around Shin's gold, but what can he really do? What can his expectations be here? Is it safe for him to just trade these Adepts out for the drones, or is he going to go for the main now and say, hey, maybe you don't have anything watching there?
Well, I don't know that I'm a fan of what Astrea is doing. So Astrea's answer is like, okay, look, you have a very exposed main base. You have a very exposed third base. There's not a lot of circulation between the two of them. Not easy for you to circulate. I can go and I can put glaives and get damage done. The problem is that Shin has no intention to take this game in a setup where he's trying to have a macro game. You want money, sure, but he's building Ravagers. He's building Lynx. He's flooding across the map. He's trying to end this game as quickly as possible. And Astrea, yes, this is a glaive timing. He's got exactly one gateway on the map, and this is an Artosis pylon if I've ever seen one. That pylon is powering everything. Astrea is just kind of dead. There's nothing here.
Yeah, I mean, this, again, we kind of talked about it a little bit right as he was taking the base, but you get the advantage of gold minerals is you just need less workers to get the same income as a regular base. So he kind of baits Astrea into trying to be a little bit aggressive against him there. And then he gets exactly what he wants. He sees, oh, there's no wall. He's like, oh, Astrea took the gold base as his natural, so I don't need to put the Ravagers on the other side. I could just go for his main, same way he did to me. And we've got a 4-minute, 19-second game number 1 out of the way.
On schedule. There we go. After that Mario game. It's funny. I gotta say, Nate, I'm really surprised that Dynasty was allowed through the bans. I'm sure Astrea had something interesting because he's Astrea. But Dynasty as a Protoss player, for Protoss players, I don't play Protoss. For Protoss players, feels almost unplayable. All right, the gold base as it is, it's so easy to punish, and they don't really have great options. Sometimes you can go blink and play around it a little bit, but it just feels really hard, and it feels a lot easier for the other races to either go and take the gold base for themselves and use that into a really quick Roach Ravager timing or something, or just go and defend it and do everything and be fine. And it feels really hard for Protoss players to play on this map. So Don't know exactly what happened on the pick ban side to make this, but I'm a little surprised to see Astrea led that through.
Yeah, it feels like that setup's gotten a lot more interesting with the expanded map pool as well. You get a little bit more of these situations where it feels like one or two of these guys just slip through, and then obviously in the later stages of the tournament you're a lot more exposed. But on one hand, it's like, yeah, the whole point of these maps is that we get to see some different types of games where players are pushed to do different stuff. And then on the other hand, sometimes the player still makes the choice that puts them behind because they try to do something about the aforementioned changes in the map and all of that. So it's an awkward situation. I kind of liked what you were saying first. It's pretty normal. Ravagers or roaches on the other side of the gold kind of poking that. But I think considering what he knew about what SHIN had, on some level there had to be some kind of assumption that aggression was on the table. But right as he got picked, he had the prism finishing and resonating glaives. So I think it's also a side effect of his strategy was never going to be that good versus a Roach Ravager setup anyway. I think maybe he was hoping that SHIN would be trying to do like, oh, I've got less workers, I've got this gold base, I'm going to just flood out tons of lings off of speed or whatever. But just that was not what he was up against. Roaches and Ravagers are going to be good against Resonating Glaive Adepts. Typically, that's what you ask for anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, I looked at what SHIN was doing. It's like, okay, he's taking the right side of the goal. He's going, which means you go for the gas. It's why you take it right. I guess it's a little bit easier to hold as the Zerg player, but it's for the gas. And it's like, okay, the moment you do that, it's going to be a Roach Ravager link timing. That is what that build goes into. So I'm a little surprised to see Astrea make a read that didn't go into that, because again, if you go 4 gig glaives, sure, fine, you can get damage done. And maybe the idea was, okay, well, circulating for the Zerg between Adepts going like between the main base and the backside of the mineral wall and go around, and with Warp Prism, like you can really abuse the Zerg. So maybe if that attack hits 30 seconds later, SHIN can never make it happen because he's just pinned back and Adepts are getting so much damage done is maybe the idea. But in general, I'm with you. It doesn't feel like it was the right approach that Astrea was taking given what he saw. So I don't know. Maybe his practice games go differently with that setup. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the only thing I could say again is, I mean, Astrea is a greedy player. It's not something that you need to follow him super closely to be aware of. He's the kind of guy that he was one of the first people doing quick expands before Cybernetics Core and all of that. So I think if he felt like there was pressure, that's always the biggest thing with the gold base. I think it's not even what you do with it. It's the opponent feeling like, okay, they're about to have a huge income spike, but if I damage their economy, then they run out of it a lot. But, then you can kind of get into more interesting, like, hypothetical strategy discussions where it's like, well, maybe if your opponent does a fast gold strategy, the whole point is to just turtle a little bit because that base mines out super fast. Then they got to do something else, right? Their income will fall off enough that they have to expand soon after. But it's not like there's that little resources there either. So little bit of a tough choice that has to be made. I think we go a little more straightforward now as we head over to Site Delta for game number 2.
And in the upper left, he's down a map. Maybe not quite the proper read, but hailing from Virtus Pro now. His name is Max Angel. It's Astrea.
The legend himself, Max Angel. His opponent in the bottom right, the red Zerg player. Leading the series 1-0, he is SHIN.
Now, Nate, you talked about, hey, mining gold out and punishing. It wasn't super relevant for that game, but there is a build that we've seen Hero Marine do a couple times. Granted, that's TVP, it's not PvZ. But where he goes and his entire push, he gets the gold base as quickly as possible, defends it. And the entire push is meant to go from his gold base to the Protest player low ground natural, so not the gold. And he times it out, so effectively he focuses mining and he focuses his muling on the lower mineral of the gold. So obviously gold patches mine out faster, and there are mineral patches that have less minerals than others. So he mines out the low mineral patch and runs his entire all in out of his mineral line across the map to take the quickest possible route. It smashes. If a Protoss player is not ready for it, maybe even if they are, it dumpsters them. So obviously it's not relevant in this game, but it is kind of cool to see players sometimes messing around with kind of gold-based mining rates to attack from different angles or things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fun side of it, right? Because I think for most players, their experience with the gold, especially on the ladder, is probably, well, I want to make sure that I pull off of those patches that are getting lower because this mines out faster, because I don't want to have to open up a wall here that doesn't have a ramp leading into it, you know? Like there's so many different choices that you have to make with that. And then sometimes you have players with Big Gabe. I'm not surprised that he's got a strategy that centers around just crushing through that as fast as possible. I was gonna say, if you're worried about mining out the gold patch, people always talk about how the mule doesn't get more money off of gold, but it is still a timed life unit that really only mines a specific amount of resources in its life. So if you're like, oh, the gold has 280 minerals, I don't want it to mine out. Well, you know, one mule will get you pretty close, but won't get rid of it, right? So things to think about, but not for this map, because there's not a big golden base for us to be having this conversation about on this map.
No, not really. So the game gets more standard. There's a Stargate on the way for Astrea. We're gonna see. It's Astrea. I was gonna say we're gonna see 3 oracles out of this, and then in the blink, and you know the story. So this is Astrea. And actually, one thing that we have seen Protoss players experimenting with, in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so, is this idea of going and getting a Void Ray first. And you might say, well, why would you do that? Void Rays have been nerfed. Double Stargate Void Ray is not a thing. And Nate, first of all, for good reason, thank goodness that strat's gone. But the idea is this oracle's gonna pop out is if you can get like 2 overlords, if you can snipe them off the map, it's generally kind of worth it to go and knock the Void Ray down. It gives you some defensive options, but again, more importantly, it kills these overlords. It denies map vision. It can supply block the Zerg in the early game, but that doesn't really matter because an oracle is popping out here from Astrea pretty early on. And I guess the thing we talk about now is, well, Astrea's got 2 adepts on the other side. Does he build a couple more and try to pair this oracle with him to really get the damage done?
Yeah, it's a very straight up sort of style, right? The Oracle and the Adepts allow you to put on enough pressure to be aware of what your opponent is doing in the early game. That informs Astrea as to his ability to take this 3rd base. So he starts the Nexus up as soon as the Oracle moves across. He knows the 3rd is almost done. He knows there's hardly any creep out of the natural. And he's also seen just Zerglings and Queens defending gas here on the natural either. So these are all signs for Astrea that it's going to be more in line with what we saw him kind of prepping against in game 1. Like it looked like he was expecting or thinking that it would be a Zergling based style, and we have Ling speed here. But it's also worth mentioning, as you said, getting the Stargate early, having the option, even if you don't want to get it, even if you think it would be a horrible choice, but having the option to get that Void Ray if the Adepts see, oh, he's going Roaches again, that Ravager is coming, having the dedicated damage output, that's invaluable.
So here's what's really interesting to me as we look at this game, Nate. This is not triple Oracle, which is really become the box standard since Hero introduced it a couple years ago, but it's double Oracle. And behind this we have plus war, we have a Forge on the way, we have a Robo, we got a Twilight, and this is looking more and more, now granted we're gonna have to see exactly where the gas goes, but this is looking more and more like this is a +1 charge idea rather than kind of getting into Blink and going from there. Again, we're gonna have to see, but Oracle goes down. That's not really what you're looking for. So generally, like, I want to get 6 drones. I guess it's gonna be Blink after all. I want to get 6 drones maybe for my Oracle play, but he only got 3, loses an Oracle for it. Astrea he still has a solid defensive setup. Single Oracle can deal with the Lings. You're not super worried about that. But even still, like, you haven't gotten enough done with these Oracles to really justify their existence, at least not yet.
Yeah, and he comes in through the 3rd base, has to bring everything back a little bit. This is the Lings, right? This is kind of what we were talking about, and this is the game where he doesn't have the quick resonating glaives Adept setup, because he kind of, I don't know if that choice was informed by the previous game, but he's definitely feels a little bit caught off guard here. So he's a guy that likes to be aggressive, wants to be aggressive. I assume with +1 in charge, this Prism is still going to try and go out and get some work done. But if you're Shin, you've got your 4th base finishing up. The creep spread, nothing to write home about, but also not as impactful in this matchup as others. And he has the map control and the vision from the Zergling. So whether he chooses to dive in on these Zealots, yeah, he is going to go for him. It's worth mentioning the +1 melee is not done yet for the Zergling. So he just says, I think I have a good enough surround without the shield battery, and I'm just going to go for it. I think this many Zerglings against just probes and 1 Oracle is probably enough. And he takes 3 probes away, and he's able to dip, and that Oracle runs out of energy. So just being super annoying in Astrea's face as much as possible.
I like to point out as well, so Astrea had Blink on the way, and then I don't know exactly, maybe it was just a fake for the entire time, maybe he saw something, but he did cancel it. So now +1 is done, charge is done, Archons have been made, and this is that charge a lot Archon, he's adding in Immortals as well kind of idea. But because Astrea took so much damage, because he's lost, what is it, 4 Zealots and Stalkers and Adepts and everything else, this timing that he's going for, yeah, it's gonna go and kill these Lings because they're, at least some of these Lings, because they're A moved on the rocks and they don't respond quite quickly enough. But this Charizard Archon idea is not going to get anything done. Shin's on 68 workers. He's happy for the time being. And he has so many Roaches on the way that this attack, I mean, you warp in, what is that, another Zealot to clear creep. Astrea doesn't need to be attacking right now. Astrea needs to be slamming down those shield batteries and cannons and everything else, because Shin's going to max out in the next minute or so, minute and a half. And Astrea, he needs to be ready. And because of how everything has gone, it's not the easiest hold.
No, really, the highlights here, it feels like in the last game, Astrea was thinking about the Lings, right? We kind of talked about it. This game, he wanted to double check and then go into the charge. You mentioned that he didn't have the Blink, didn't have the Resonating Glaives. I think when the first thing you're doing when you get that Archon drop is you're having to use it defensively, and you're not able to get any element of surprise. You're not able to get any like, oh yeah, he doesn't have something in this spot because he's not expecting it. When they're just ready for it like that, that is always a really tough spot to be in. I love the Zealot control here, just focusing down the Queen and then going for the pickup so he can escape. So nice little bit of control there out of the Zealot drop. But this is an army that swells in supply rather quickly. A lot of Roaches, a lot of Lings. We got almost 200 supply Shin versus 120 from Astrea. That being said, Storm is finished in 3 seconds, so it's not impossible to hold, but it might be ugly if he gets a good spread on this.
We should point out, by the way, that Shin was pretty heavily supply blocked for 30 seconds or so this attack could be hitting 30 seconds sooner. Storms for now on the Roaches, Lings just a little bit better. The problem is this sledgehammer of Roach Ravager on the right side are going to get right on top of Eye Templar. One falls, second one goes down, and there is one more Storm, certainly, but Zealots are going to try to filter in more and more. The problem is, realistically, well, first of all, Shield Battery Overcharge isn't healing the Archons. One of them goes down. It was healing the cannon. Even still, though, the Zealots, for now, they're on top of the Ravagers. Ravagers actually die fairly quickly to Zealots, so Astrea, his supply is pretty much the same as it was when the attack started, and Shin's is about 50 down from where it was. So on top of that, fourth base still there. Yes, the pylon's going to go down, but Astrea handles this first hit just about as well as you possibly could.
Yeah, that fourth base getting popped kind of sucks, but at the same time, it is, you know, if he had held it right, 4 base Protoss versus 4 base Zerg, that's not a situation we're typically too concerned about the Protoss in. He is trying to secure his fourth again on the north side, but being 3 bases versus 4 with a full economy, it's a very playable position for this matchup. So Astrea is able to get another Zealot run by through. He's continuing to try and harass and put on as much pressure as he can, getting a few more drones at that northeast base, but he's done a decent enough job of keeping things moving along where he'll get another shot at it. But we're supply-wise, we're still looking at similar to where we were a few minutes ago, 112 to 168. And then for Shin, a little bit of that supply is going to come back in when he makes it. He's going to make a handful more Ravagers, but he's also been primarily just making Ling, Ravager, Roach. So he doesn't need that much money. He's going to be able to squeeze out a lot of units very quickly. And Astrea is going to need to get another big cost-effective trade or two. And if he does that, then I think things start to get a little tougher for the Zerg. Holding this fourth base is going to need to be a start, though.
Dude, this is so many Storms. He's got 9 High Templar. Like, yeah, you know, if a big Baneling connection, because we don't have Baneling speed just yet, it's on the way. A big Baneling connection or a Bile or something happens, that's a problem. But this is 9 High Templar. Like, this is so... And okay, I guess these only have 1 Storm. Yeah, they're going to have 1 Storm soon. But this is like 14 Storms or something like that. Some ridiculous number like that. If yes, Astrea's down about 60 supply, but if these Storms land, it is very hard for Shin to do anything about it on this composition. So Hive's on the way. Hydra Den's on the way. 31 Banelings morphing in. I guess they're going to try to bust this third base down and get on top of the mineral line, but you don't generally kill bases with Banes in this matchup. It's all about, you know, maybe knocking down the static defense or something. This is a big sledgehammer coming in from Shin on the north side.
Yeah, that's as some would say, it's a reasonable amount. So many Banelings. He's got 40 of them pushing up the top side. There's those Storms you were talking about, though. And look, you can try to split Templar. You can try to split the Banelings versus the Templar. But when there's that many Psy Storms, everything is just getting rained on. And the biggest thing I think he did before this fight was just make sure he pulled the probes away, and he never tried to send them back. He's just leaving them there chilling until this army is gone, because he knows that's the only thing that really hurts him. 71 to 78 workers, fantastic spot to be in for the Protoss. Not only that, he secures the 4th base, and his 5th is about halfway done. So if this Zealot attack on the south side is able to buy him even just a minute, half a minute, that should be enough for him to be able to go get that 4th a little more situated, or at least try and get something to help situate it. It still has the Overlord at the outside of the natural too. He never cleared that. So at some point, that's going to give him a little bit more info too when workers start transferring over there.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. But I mean, I'm getting seriously worried about SHIN right now. The first 2 attacks, first one got something done. Kansas base is actually +2 lings are very spicy. Do they have adrenal? No, they don't. But even still, +2 lings are going to be spicy enough to cancel this. But this army that Astrea is building against Hydra Ling Lurker, which is kind of what he's transitioning into, lots of lurkers. Nate, he's got 8 immortals. He's going to go up to 10. He's got a bunch of storms. He's going to have a charge to reinforce. This army, unless you're looking at, I don't know, 15, 20 lurkers, something like that, like a significant amount of lurkers that SHIN won't really be able to afford for quite a while, if ever, is not one that loses to the army that SHIN has. Yeah, supply is a little bit ahead of the Zerg, ahead for the Zerg, but the quality of this army is so much higher than what SHIN is, A, what SHIN has, but B, more importantly, what SHIN is building into, that I am starting to get very afraid for our Korean Zerg.
Yeah, we head towards the dance, right? The lurkers, and then the Tempest or the carriers, whatever the tier 3 choice of air is. But we see a lot of it become try to land the revelation, try to land the abducts onto those air units to pull them through, and then the other big thing too is that the Oracle and the Revelation conversation, because as I'm sure many of you are aware, the Observer, that's typically your most stable detection that you have for Protoss. And then, well, you know, Protoss and Zerg can both kind of siege their air detectors, so it makes it a little bit harder to keep your observers from getting picked off. And then playing that kind of chess match against the lurkers, that can just be, that's got to be one of the most stressful things to deal with, man. Glad I don't do that.
All right, so Astrea's got 2 fleet beacons. He's got 1 done already, second one on the way. I guess just lost track of it, but that he's not quite rich enough where that doesn't matter. You know, it'll always matter because these games can turn into games of attrition. Sure, fine. But he's still at the point where he's not maxed out, where every little bit of minerals, every little bit of gas does matter as he makes that transition. So, unfortunate. Is it going to matter? Who knows? But for right now, I understand setting up the ecosystem to go into Sky Toss if you need to. But this is still like, I was going to say this is still a game that he can win on the ground. But 17 lurkers is starting to get to that number where even
I mean, yeah, you're not engaging this head on with any ground force, right? Like that'd be borderline suicide at this point. So you kind of have to have other tools to either force them to spread those units out, or you make, again, the air transition. That's why we talk about it. Does get 2 of the lurkers with the stasis though. Still has them mostly revealed and drops the storm on the way out. Looks like he'll get 1 of them, but it is again, the risk here, I guess, for SHIN is that these lurkers are more or less completely unsupported, right? He does have some Roachling coming in from behind now, but he doesn't want to let him get a complete surround either, because then 17 maybe isn't enough versus a 360-degree surround.
Yeah, look what Astrea is getting set up here, by the way. This is that 360 surround. He looks to move in from every single side, and we're going to see the slow field as well, so a lot of those spines are not going to get any damage done. It's disgusting. It's an annihilation, evaporation here of the majority of this army. Zealots are cloaked as well.
A little bit off creep there, didn't he? Just a little bit.
Yes, okay. You know, in fairness, that was 4 Immortals dead and a bunch of Archons died, and unfortunately 9 High Templar died as well. But in the balance of things, that was SHIN's army, and it's gone now.
Yeah, his whole losing 17 lurkers to it's like people talk about, it's like, well, why are lurkers good? It's like oh yeah, because they do splash damage, because they do line damage, because they have range. It's like, no, lurkers are good for the same reason that tanks are good. It's not that they kill everything, it's that when they're in the right spot they can kill an infinite amount of stuff. But right in the middle, you know, that many different angles to approach, it was adventurous. It was adventurous. I won't knock it, but I will say it didn't quite have the results he was perhaps expecting. And now the carriers are coming out, so now he gets to deal with the consequences of his push not winning the game.
If it isn't the consequences of my own actions, hate to see it. But the other thing, you talk about carriers popping out, there's no carapace for Zerg, and Yes, Hydras can be an answer to carriers in some numbers, but when they don't have Carapace, and certainly when the Protoss player has +1, +2 on those carriers, Hydras just melt. They do not handle the interceptors well.
Hydras are squishy.
Yeah.
They're very squishy. Yeah, it's a very important point to bring up, that the focus has been on the attack upgrades, and it's like, yeah, +3 air attack, that's fantastic. But the interceptors are going to be a huge problem. He actually sends the Immortals to the north side during that drop. That Warp Prism pulled the whole army up, so he's able to snatch the north base. And SHIN feeling like he has to make a little bit of something happen. He is maxed, but it's still spread out. He's going to move over towards that third base one more time, and he does get confirmation of the carrier, but it is just the one carrier, actually, so not quite enough to push this whole army back yet either.
Yeah, here's the problem, though. SHIN at most gets the... Oh, Mothership is... you don't want to lose that one. That is a recall available to you. He's going to close... Like, look... Oh, I know. Sorry, that was a recall. Tried to bring his army to him. Did not work out here, so the base goes down. But the point I'm making, right? So at the most, SHIN probably gets this base. You don't want to lose it. That's a lot of probes, and now you actually don't have a recall available to recall the probes and the army. That's a little bit more complicated. The problem is that SHIN gets one base. Astrea gets every base. He gets all the tech. He's knocked down 2 already. He's going to knock down the natural here. Doesn't want to lose that observer, and we'll pull it back in time. But the damage that has been done by this setup is so incomparable, right? It's 3 bases. The main base, we're going to go to the main base now. The tech's going to be a problem. And yeah, you got a lot of lurkers here, SHIN. How in the world do you get up this choke?
Yeah, you don't, right? There's so many storms. The Immortals alone, just trying to get up there and then siege, he's gonna lose. Again, the full tech reset is really important to keep in mind too, right? Like, you lose the hive, you lose the spawning pool, you lose the infestation pit, you can't even rebuild the player. You can't even rebuild any of the things that you just lost. So you're more or less going back to the Stone Age. And let me tell you, that's a lot of wood, gold, and other things you're going to have to pull together to get that next tech back up. So he does find another one of the bases in the southwest, but I think that northwest base for Astrea, that's kind of his anchor. It's his anchor in shaky seas, as he's been able to keep that. That's been the biggest source of his fresh income for a while. The bottom left base he couldn't quite keep, and there's the recall to get his army out of the main. I love that he just leaves the one Immortal there too. Don't know if it was intentional or not, but trying to hit the drones on the low ground. It's just a little heads up play. Now you love to see it.
Doesn't quite have the range though. I guess it's not in a depth. Doesn't like. Oh God, I want to do it.
When Immortal range upgrade. When 7 range Immortal. When?
Don't talk about that, Nate. Immortals are already strong enough, okay? I know they're already a struggle. Please don't make them better.
I don't know. I got no beef with Immortals. I'm sorry.
As a Zerg player, that I have a lot of beef with Immortals. They are sneaky broken right now. I'm just saying it. And well, SHIN's gonna have to break through that sneaky broken unit, and he's gonna knock a base down. He did put the lurkers in a really kind of an untouchable spot. You cannot get that full surround. But the problem is the carrier count continues to increase. We're at 4 right now. We're going to go up to 6 soon. The mothership's been remade. This Immortal is can't get the probes, certainly, or the drones, certainly, but drones turn into extractors, and he's killed 2 of those, so we'll say it's the same thing, right?
Hey, every extractor you kill, you got to spend a drone to rebuild it. It's not like they don't need the gas, right? So he tries to come up here, gets a little cheeky storm off on this army as he repositions, and big difference from last time is that it's not just a bunch of lurkers. He has a pretty decent ball of Hydras. The DPS output from that is going to make it really painful if he tries to dive this army again, but that's where the carriers are going to try and tip things the other way. So it's a dicey position, but I think if you're Astrea, it's your game to throw at this point, just because SHIN, again, in Shadow Realm, as far as his tech's concerned, he's about to finish his lair again. We're at 20 and a half minutes in, and if he wants to get more Vipers, now he has to start a Hydra. He's gonna have to start the Infestation Pit, start the Hydralisk Den, and then start the Hive, and we're about two, maybe 3 minutes away from more Vipers, so losing any of those becomes like just absolutely horrible for him. So exercise patience, take as many bases as you can, get your production up, and just don't put yourself in a position to throw. Okay, yeah, SHIN kind of realizes he's been boxed out, so that'll do it then, and we go to game 3.
That we will. It's like one of those things where, okay, you assuming you have the time to get to Hive. SHIN was mining off of 2 gas, and the map was very slow, very rapidly actually getting constrained against him. So it was like, great, you got a Hive. Can you support the gas required to build more Vipers? I don't think so. It's just your economy's dead, your army's dead, your tech is dead.
It costs so much too. It's like rebuilding the spawning pool is one thing, but it's like you can't do anything until after it's finished. And then there's 100 gas, another 100 for the infestation pit. Hive's like what, 200, 150 gas, something ridiculous like that. So all of a sudden, that's like 3 or 4 of your lurkers you're giving up just to rebuild your tech that you lost.
Well,
so,
it's not like you can convert
tough.
them into lurkers anyways. Your lurker den's also dead, so.
Oh yeah, good point. That's.
It's not like you're losing
you
out
just
any
can't
lurkers,
really.
right?
What can you make? What can you make with a hatchery and nothing else? I believe drones and overlords. I might be wrong on that.
Have you heard of Have you heard of the story of the mass overlord? If you build more overlords, then like enough overlords to blot out the map, then your opponent cannot micro because they can't target fire your units.
It's not a secret the Balance Council would tell you.
Exactly.
They say there was one who was so gifted with the power of overlords that he could win games with just them. But it's sadly that knowledge was lost, and it cannot be learned by anyone else.
Every
time.
I bet if you went and I don't know that it's available now because I think just the average skill of a StarCraft player, even like in say bronze or something, is going to be knowledge is going to be a little bit too high. But maybe like 8 years ago, if you maxed out, or you can't max out on overlords, if you built like a ton of overlords and like tried to just intimidate your opponent out of the game, like in bronze or whatever, like what was it? There was a league below bronze at one point, right? Like a intro league. If you do it there, I bet you could intimidate a player out of the game.
Yeah, or it's like the 4v4. It's like you're like your 3 teammates are gonna rush carriers, and you make nothing but like 400 overseers, and then when you drop changelings, everybody lags out of the game, right? You're talking about some real unhinged type strategies there. But theoretically, you can make as many overlords / overseers as you want, but
play is actually to leverage the fact that your PC is better than your opponent's, and you just cover the entire map with creep tumors.
That's why people play Mass Ling. They just like I only like to have 120 Lings running around specifically because I know it's gonna cut his FPS in half. I'm just a monster. That's about it.
Monster mash maybe, but we gotta talk about one player that is a monster, at least in game 1. Let's see if he can do it again. In the upper left on Oceanborn, it's SHIN.
And he faces off against the blue Protoss player in the bottom right. He is Astrea.
Nate.
Funky series so far, huh? It felt like everything last game was kind of normal, and then SHIN he tried to force it before the Vipers is really what it felt like, or he didn't think he could get the Vipers close enough. I don't know what it was, but just moving the 17 lurkers forward and having everything else like 2 screens away off creep. That was, I feel like SHIN just felt like there was some sort of pressure. I don't know what it was that made him kind of push into that situation, but I feel like for him, this game, he wasn't necessarily in a bad spot. I thought we kind of liked his early game, so he's just got to be a little more patient maybe with some of those moves. It's got to be frustrating, perhaps even a bit tilting when he does that attack on the north side, and there's just like, what was it, Bayo? Like 9 Templar with full energy? Just brutal.
Yeah, I think part of what it is, as we get later and later, and this patch develops a little bit more, you talk to a lot of Zerg players, and they're going to say that mass immortal setup, double robo, triple robo, when you have that many immortals, it feels really hard. It feels extremely hard to deal with. Lurkers, at a certain point, I mean, we saw what happened. Yes, if you put yourself in a really nice sieged up position, and you force the Protoss player to attack from like one angle, you go from there. Sure, fine. But in general, this Charge Lot, Archon, Immortal, Storm, given the state of just how the balance is, just all the buffs and nerfs the different units have gotten, it feels really hard to fight. Yes, you can go into Broodlords. Broodlords are not particularly a good unit for the most part right now. So it's like, well, I go Lurkers, but if I'm on Lurkers, I'm on a timing, and I have to win the game because eventually the units, they do not scale into the late game. The Protoss player can outscale on the ground, they can outscale in the air. The Lurkers are very much a timing-based unit. So by SHIN, by going for that, I guess maybe thinking he was in a better position than he was, or he could put himself in a better position, like position on the map than maybe he otherwise would have been able to find, did have to go with those Lurkers. Eventually, you get +3 and start to get shields, and you get to like 12 immortals and storms and everything. It becomes very difficult for that army that SHIN has to ever take a cost-effective trade.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where we talk about like what's changed, what's happened, you know, what is the state of the game, how did we get to these conclusions about the state of the game and stuff like that. I think it really just speaks volumes. Again, you look back on last year with the big open maps, those third bases were really hard to take. You had huge angles with multiple different attack paths onto almost every third base. And then this year, it's been tightened up quite a bit. You know, you look at a map like Oceanborn, there's really only one direct path towards where that third is. It's pretty easy to put your army somewhere that covers both of them. That makes the game, you know, tons easier when it comes to dealing with things like the Zergling run-bys and all of that stuff, which was a huge part of the meta of last year. You see a pretty tremendous amount of those heavy link plays, and the Protoss either having to decide to send the Oracle back or whether they're going to have the wall off with the pylon and the Zealot next to it and all of that. And it can be, it's still something that you occasionally see, but it's obviously a lot easier to deal with when your natural or your main is a hop, skip, and a jump from your third, rather than, you know, your third being like 2 screens away.
And even this, right? You talk about the Ling flood early. Yeah, this isn't going to get a lot done because the Oracle is here, but it's forcing energy from the Oracle on this side of the map, and that means that it's not going to be damaged on the other side. And realistically, Astrea has wasted a lot of energy on this Oracle for not a lot of Lings. So
if he cancels the third, this is everything I think that you want for SHIN. That's a huge dub. But
it should never happen.
It's supposed to be a lot harder to do this. I think losing the Adept and the Oracle energy, though, I think this was just that was just a huge play by SHIN. He gets the cancel. Didn't have to flood out a bunch more Lings across the map. There was no desperate scramble. He just cancels it at 99% and goes home. You're not going to do anything else with those Zerglings for a long time in this game. So what more can you really ask of them? It's a nice little pickup. He is going to make a few more Lings. He's going to start his Spore Crawlers as he hits a mild supply block bump and gets ready to defend against the Oracle harass.
And it was a massive mistake from Astrea. He turned the Oracle beam on. I don't think he ever turned it off, and he just let the Oracle sit there instead of chasing the Lings down. And then that meant that he ran out of energy, and the Lings canceled the third base. And now we talked about how much damage Oracles have to get done. On the one hand, Oracle, this is a macro opener, absolutely. But you do want Oracles to get damage done. Letting them say 1 or 2 drones is not great. And because this third base has been delayed, it's even worse. And as the Lings show up on the other side, it's a full surround on the Adept, on the Stalkers. They force the Oracles back home again. And Astrea is not dead in this map. Absolutely not. But SHIN is running this map. He's got everything that he could want. And now the question becomes, what is it that he wants? Is it going to be Storm Host? Probably not. Not on this map. He's not really building into it up on that timing. Is it just a big Roach Ravager Sledgehammer? I don't know. Looks like it. But anything that SHIN wants right now, he's allowed to have.
Yeah, that map control that you can get from a situation like this is just really nice. The Stalker count goes up, he can kind of zone and push away, but otherwise things kind of cruise back into a more stable PvZ situation. That being said, 3-base Protoss versus 3-base Zerg, not like Astrea is going to be complaining too much as his probe count goes back up. I think big things that he'll probably be keeping his eyes on, as he is just going to go for a little move out. He wants to see what he can get if SHIN's being too greedy. But for SHIN, he still needs to think about where he wants that mid-late game to go, because it wasn't like he didn't have the opportunity to do what he wanted last game either. The reaction and the follow-up is going to be super important, although there are a few more pretty standard choke points that people move through on this map. This map's pretty reasonably choky, so those lurkers, maybe they find a bit more purchase, or maybe we just see something a little bit differently out of him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. For now, he's trying to put pressure on the 4th base. Not a lot of Stalkers, though, so an Overseer goes down, an Overlord should fall down here as well, and that's always going to be really nice. His Lings shark around, but it really shouldn't get a lot there. The SimCity is well set up for Astrea. But again, so we don't have a Robo, right? But there's no pylon on the map either. This is just the Stalkers are going to do what they can. Stasis Trap is going to show up, not get a lot done here. And I think this should just force... I don't know if it forces... Yeah, no, with the Lings behind, this is going to have to be a recall, but it's a sloppy one. So 2 of the Stalkers are going to go down. Oracles, they kill some Lings, sure, fine, but they're out of energy here for the most part. And now SHIN is the one that can feel pretty unlocked on the map. You know what? By the way, Nate, I said it probably wasn't going to be Swarm Host based on the timing. I lied. It is Swarm Host after all.
That's okay. It's all good. The best part is getting to watch these guys do their thing. You know, I don't try to guess too much what's going to happen. I just like to see it, baby. The Nidus is going to make things nuts. He can hit on that southwest side. There is a Zergling on the north side, 3rd base too. So, I mean, for Swarm Host, what's the key? It's always that you really want the first wave of Locusts to completely catch your opponent off guard. Like if you can deal any amount of damage with the first wave, that typically can snowball. But if the first wave gets shut down, then usually as a Zerg, you're feeling pretty sad, right? So this is a big moment here as he drops that first wave, and if he just clicks that Nexus and gets it, that's devastating.
So I got good news and bad news here. So he's gonna click the Nexus down. I think it is just gonna die. No, actually no, he's got Storm of Time. It's still dead. I was gonna say I got good news and bad news. Good news for SHIN, the supply is there. It is a massive lead, and Astrea doesn't seem to know. The bad news, technically, a storm is done, and you can storm down Locust Waves and really minimize the damage they get done. Turns out that was also good news because it just wasn't there in time, and the Natural's dead. Astrea now, he does have a powerful army. He's got +1 Blink Stalker. They handle the roaches fairly nicely. But you only have about a 30-second window to fight every single time, because then, well, there's another Nidus. Swarm hosts are going to pop up. You got to, oh, Stalkers are maybe going to find this, maybe force some of the Locusts to land. Not going to do that. And where's our defense here? Okay, good news. Actually, he's not going to click the Nexus down, so Shield Battery Overcharge should keep this alive. Stasis Traps on the north side are doing a really nice job. And Astrea has an opportunity here to hold this base. Nope, never mind. I lied. Never mind.
When that first wave catches you off guard, the DPS on those Locusts, man, they rip buildings down so fast. And it's worth mentioning too, because of the Roach upgrades that he got, no melee this time. Those Locusts also benefit from his +1 attack. So I think that's another thing that's helped him just barely edge this fight out. And you know, the conversations people have about roles that different units have, but the Swarm Host, it's like a holding unit. You know, it still takes up supply. It gives you tremendous value, but in between those waves, it doesn't do anything. So for SHIN, he has to put this pressure on, because if he gets attacked and he has to defend without his Locust wave, then his army is a lot worse, right? So this is just that back and forth now, where because he couldn't withstand the first attack, now the only way to withstand the follow-ups is to keep his whole army home. And honestly, I think for SHIN, this is the beginning of a build-up to the place he needs to get. He's getting his lair, getting his lurker den, continuing to eat the map control with the Nidus, and it's just a frustrating spot to be in for the Protoss.
You know, Nate, I gotta say, I was really surprised that we didn't see Oracles using Stasis Traps on the mineral line. So yes, they can be really good against the Roaches and the Ravagers, 100%. But every Locust caught in a Stasis Trap is dead. It times out before the Stasis Trap ends. That timer does decrement as the Stasis Trap is going, unlike most things. So it's a better storm. It's really what it is. The Lings are going to try to click that Nexus down. We'll cancel, but things go down.
The Natural's getting sniped too.
Yeah. Man, you're right. Once this starts to snowball, it's really hard to unsnowball. Astrea's supply is growing. If you can get like 175, you can generally run across the map and make something happen. But it's like that we already have to look at it like he is gonna have to base trade. Because for SHIN, why would you ever just not launch a wave of Locust at one of their bases every time they leave? So the only way to defend is with your full army, which means if he moves out, he's got to be ready for it to lead to the end of the game. And that's where the transition in the lurkers is just, you know, that's some great big brain plays there. Keep just enough defensively that when he tries to force that you have something for it. Yeah, good news for Astrea is that for the first time, a Nidus didn't get up, the Swarm Host didn't spend their wave, and that is something. And, you know, when you talk about this as well, as the Storm is not really going to land, if you go for the Swarm Host Roach Ravager, which is exactly what SHIN is going for, you're not going to have as many workers as you might otherwise go for, because there's a lot of supply. Yes, it is a lot of damage. We've seen 3 bases go down. Oh, this is actually such a big deal here. Yeah, lurkers are good eventually, but if he can knock down so many of these Swarm Hosts, knock that supply down, knock that potential down, yeah, the Swarm Hosts, they may knock this base down, but this has got to be a go period for Astrea right now. He knows that SHIN's supply has been slammed into the ground. He knows, yes, there's maybe a transition, but you gotta try your luck here, especially as that base is gonna get canceled. Although the other way to look at this is, now the pressure on my bases is gone.
This is fascinating, Theo. He's remaxing into Ling Roach with his lurker support. It's still I'm not going to say low tech, because the lurkers are the tech, but he's got a crazy amount of Lings, which makes me feel like he's hoping to go for a dive on maybe one of these armies out on the map or something if he can. Those stasis wards were probably the most clutch setup that he had. He actually does get a pretty big one outside where that Nidus is building. So maybe that's what buys Astrea the space that he needs, but SHIN has been making it very difficult for him to get where he wants. And with this big max out, is he going to be able to do it? The revelation is on some of the lurkers. He's going to put the Nidus on the other side of the wall to let himself in or reinforce behind it. The Swarm Hosts come up, but there's only 4 of them left, so we typically talk about Zerglings not being like the end game unit for fighting these upgraded forces, but since it is just a bunch of Stalkers and Immortals, the single target DPS for taking out huge swells like that isn't really there without the Storm.
No, it's not. Oh man, these Immortals are starting to go down as well. I was gonna say, you know, I kind of like it. Astrea setting up the surround. He's got Immortals here. It's only 4 or it's only 8 lurkers, but that Nidus on the other side, generating creep, allowing the next or allowing things to get knocked down. All of a sudden,
He's twisting the knife there. That's what that is. Like, this would be, I think traditionally it would be somewhat difficult to reinforce across the map a push like this, and maybe Astrea holds it. But with the Nidus for the instant transmission across the field, that's just filthy. You love to see it. SHIN takes a 2-1, and I feel like we can say after the way that series went, it definitely